Welcome to the Environmental Justice Lab. I'm your host, Dr. Jael Joseph. Thank you so much for joining me. So if you're a fan or subscriber of the podcast, you know that I have not done any interviews on the podcast. It's usually just me speaking about whatever issues are going on or just trying to help us understand better some of the issues that surround environmental justice. Well, that changes today. I was very fortunate to get an amazing interview with somebody really special to me, and I'm really excited to share the interview with you today. This individual is smart, she's funny, she is so intelligent, she is athletic, she has a lot going for her. She's also 11 years old, and she is my daughter. And so for so long, she's been asking me about being on the podcast. She has a lot of strong views about how the environment should be managed and stewarded. And so on the show today, we have my daughter, JJ, who is going to share her thoughts and her perspectives on the environment, on justice, and even on education. And so I hope you enjoy it. Stay tuned. This is the Environmental Justice Lab. Welcome to the Environmental Justice Lab. I am your host, Dr. Jael Joseph. Thank you so much for joining us. I say us because we have a very special guest today. Her name is JJ. She plays lots of tennis. She's a rising sixth grader. And more importantly, she is my daughter. JJ, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks. It's really glad to be here.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad you're here also. So, JJ, I hear you're an amazing tennis player. Is that true?
Yes, I've been playing for some time now.
How much time?
About 7 years.
Wow, you've been playing tennis for 7 years?
Yeah.
Do you like it?
Yeah, it's really fun. You gotta work hard. It's all about conditioning too.
Why is conditioning so important?
You can't just run and just be out there. You gotta condition yourself so you won't break down, let's say, during a match.
That makes a lot of sense. I wonder if part of that conditioning is being able to handle the weather while you're playing. Is that part of it too?
Yep. That's how we go in the mornings. So we can have that shade and cool temperatures.
Interesting. So it's cooler in the mornings than it is later in the day?
Of course. The sun is still rising, so it's not at its full heat yet. That happens around noon.
Okay. And so, on the podcast, we talk a lot about the climate and about environmental issues. And I wonder, because you've been playing tennis for so long, have you seen any differences in the weather and the climate each of the summers when you've been playing tennis?
Actually, I noticed that having clouds cover the sun makes a more significant difference than it did, let's say, last year.
Interesting. Is the temperature higher or lower from now than when it was when you started playing tennis 7 years ago?
Well, I was in a different state, so it might feel different, but it was definitely cooler than it was now.
Oh, interesting. It used to be cooler than it is now. That's interesting because a lot of scientists and researchers are telling us that there's global warming and the temperatures are rising.
Yeah, isn't that what I said?
Well, it is. I'm just letting you know that the scientists agree with you and they see the same thing that you're seeing.
Well, it's easier for me to tell because I sweat so much. I can just detect the mini changes that most people might not get.
That's true. That is very true. When you're playing tennis and you're out there and you're sweating, are you concerned about your health?
Of course. The air quality has gotten so bad, it's making it harder for me to breathe sometimes.
Wow, that is unfortunate. I can't believe the air is getting worse and worse while you're outside trying to play tennis.
And the UV rays? I mean, really? I forgot my Black Girl sunscreen at my house, so the sunscreen I use doesn't go on your face. That's sunburn waiting to happen.
It is, and you gotta have sunscreen because with the sun the way it is now and the temperatures getting higher and higher, it's going to be really important to protect our skin while we're outside playing tennis or doing anything at all.
Yes, that is true.
It is true. I wonder, do they talk about this stuff in school?
No.
They don't talk about protecting yourself with sunscreen and how to be safe outside when you're playing in school?
No.
Well, why not?
The same reason why I don't talk about Black history.
What reason is that?
I don't know.
Mm.
They just don't do it.
Well, they need to. It's important for all the children to be safe while they're playing outside. Sunscreen, drinking lots of water, coming in when it's too hot. We got to do these kind of things. It's really important. I don't want the kids to be struggling when they're outside playing.
And we're not even learning about current wars. We're stuck about learning wars in the past. And we can't be learning about what's happening now. No news or anything about what's happening now. It's all the past. What about the present?
Yeah, the present's important. But the past is important too, so you know what happened in the past. Hopefully it won't happen again in the future if we know what happened and we can learn from it.
But it has happened. It's happening right now in Russia. I mean, in Ukraine. And they're not talking about it at all.
You want them to?
Yeah. We need to learn what's going on now too, because in 70 years, that's going to be history.
That's true. We're living in that history right now. But let me ask you this question. We talked about how they don't teach you much about how to take care of yourself outside. When you're in class, do they talk about the environment at all? Any environmental issues?
No, not issues, but definitely animals and science and all that stuff. But they don't go into the environmental issues as in right now.
So they don't talk about global warming or climate change? Things like that?
No. Well, maybe a tad about the climate change, but they don't really go into it like they do in the wars. We hear nothing about global warming. Barely any about climate change.
Interesting. Do they talk about things like how difficult it is to get water in some parts of the world?
No. It's always what's happening in America. Nowhere else.
They only talk about America? They don't talk about world issues, global issues?
Just America and its wars. Well, I'm still in the 5th grade, so I might not go that deep into it, but who knows? In 80 years, that's going to be what they're talking about.
That's true. It's going to be totally different in 80 years with the way the climate's changing. It's going to be really difficult in 80 years to live out here. So I hope they'll start teaching people how to deal with it and what's happening out there.
They're not doing it now. What's the point? Soon, it won't even be happening at all. They're not even talking about the ways that we can help it. Out of the whole 180 days of school, we watched one video about what you can do to stop climate change. 1 or 2 videos.
For the whole year?
The whole year.
What was that video about?
How the glaciers were melting. That's what one video was about. The other one is just about not eating meat. And all that, watch your diet, don't eat this, don't drink that. Make sure you should ride bikes and not ride your car and all that stuff. Not like this is why it helps. We barely even know what a carbon footprint is.
So it sounds like to me, we need a big change in how the environment is being discussed in your school. And I bet other schools are the same way.
They barely said anything about carbon footprint. One video. That's it. Instead, they didn't even go into the depths of it like they did with the animals and all that stuff that we all know is threatened. They didn't even talk about that.
That is disappointing. And I'm sorry that you're not getting a full education that talks about the environment and the issues associated with it because it's really important. I'm going to tell you some things right now, and I want you to tell me what you think about it. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. There is research that tells us it's going to be really, really difficult to get water in the next 10 to 15 years because of climate change and because of the way we consume water in the United States. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm going to be alive, and don't you only drink what you are going to drink?
We do, but in America, we use water for a lot of things that other people don't use it for. For instance, think about this. We don't all have sprinklers. Some of us do, some of us don't. So we're using more water for sprinklers. What about pools? Big pools, large, deep pools, they use lots of water. What about people who love to wash their cars? Every weekend, using a lot of water. And so if everybody in the whole world used water the way we use it in America, it would be really hard to sustain the supply of water for everybody to use.
I think that we should have more scientists that look into how to keep grass growing without water. I think we should cut back on our water by having less pools and trying to go to more of the lakes and the freshwater sources. Since it's already freshwater, you don't have to put all that chemical in it.
No, I love that idea.
Like, what if instead of pools, people had little places by certain rivers? And like Lake Murray, they should have a place there, and just like swim team and all that blah blah stuff, they can have it at the lake. They don't need to clean it that much. It's already clean. I mean, they need to be thinking about new innovative ways to save and help other people. I mean, it's the technology age, right? Use some of that technology.
Absolutely. And I love the idea of actually going to nature and what we already have, what's already existing in the world, and enjoying that instead of building new things and using chemicals to take care of it and to continue to consume.
Just like oil and gas, fuel. Did you know that certain animals use leftovers for energy?
I did not know that.
Since it's so technical, they should create ways to get the fuel back to Earth or have new fuel without oil or gas.
Yes, we should have different kinds of fuels. Oil and gas are the most polluting ways of using fuel, and it creates all of the gases that lead to climate change.
And they should just you know how they have all this gas prices and new cars and new phones?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of that, they should be conducting research to help us connect more with nature, not bind against it. We don't need all these houses. We need these forests. Don't you want to breathe?
I want to breathe. But what are you going to say to those families and those other kids who want to have a brand new car when they turn 16? Or when they want to have their own house instead of living with a big group of people in one house?
They can have certain things like cabins, Back in the day, they had cabins that you could live in that uses only wood, and you don't have to have all this metal, all this tile, and you don't need these new bathroom design thingies. I mean, go simple. We have a long time left on this earth, and we want it to last, don't we? They should provide newer ways to, let's say for cars. They should have good cars still, I think so. But a new car every couple months? That's just too much, right? I was thinking a new car, a brand new version, every 3 to 5 years. So people can have time to just use it instead of always rushing to buy the new thing.
I remember you were telling me about that. You were saying instead of having a 22, 23, 24, 25 model of a car every year, we should just have a 2023 and then maybe wait a few years and have a 2026. And that way we don't have to have new car production so often all the time. I think it's a great idea.
I think, you know how we have all that trash, all that dump?
Mm-hmm.
We should find a way to use that and conduct it into fuel. If scientists actually looked into all of this, we would be having cars running on leftovers that your own family generates. So you don't have to pay for gas. You can just go to your trash can, and instead of taking it to the garbage place, use it as fuel to your car. It may take a while, but it is worth looking into.
I completely agree. We should look at all these waste sources, all this trash, and see how we can reuse it instead of throwing it in a big landfill or burning it up and causing more pollution or dumping it in rivers and lakes and streams and polluting our environment. We don't need to do that. We need to reuse whatever we can to minimize our waste and be sustainable in how we live.
Yeah, And also, you know how the air's so bad?
Mm-hmm.
I bet the next generation will have to deal with artificial air.
Artificial air. So somebody's going to make air in a lab and sell it for us to breathe?
No! Like have all these, you know how greenhouse? They have in the greenhouse with all the plants, you have a little house thing?
Mm-hmm.
That's probably going to be for certain places. They're going to have certain chemicals they release to purify, quote unquote, air and make it clean like they do with chlorine. They'll be cleaning the air when all we need to do is cut back on the factories. They should start planting trees and thinking deeper and change the school curriculums so we can actually have the education that we need so the kids can be aware of, and when they grow up, they can actually do something.
That is a great idea. So we are running out of time, but I want to give you an opportunity to say whatever you want to say to our listeners when it comes to the environment, to being a kid growing up in a place where the environment's getting worse and worse. You're not learning it in school. What do you want us to know?
Well, number one, don't always think that if your teachers don't say it, it's not true. And if your parents don't say it, it's not true. You probably don't know a lot about the environment and changes. So try researching on that. Make it fun. Have an activity, competition. Who can find out the most and who can do it the best. Make it fun and maybe get rewards for it. And then soon you'll be reducing and reusing everything. You know how people make these big feasts?
Mm-hmm.
People should, instead having all those leftovers that probably go to waste, they should make sure they have the exact number of people going to be there on that day so they can create just the right amount of food, thinking about what would an average person want. Let's say the kids, let's say she's 11 like me. They might have a big appetite, so I'll just put them right in the middle. They won't be stuffed, but they won't be hungry. They should make exactly what they think would help for that amount of people. Instead of having all those leftovers for weeks, they should just, if it's going to be a small party, not have such a big thing. Still have the same ingredients, still have the same food, just not as much. And maybe we should stop using all this pollution and stuff. Cut the chemicals. They should stop selling tobacco products, vape, and cigarettes. If we just eliminate that, then it'll be like back in the 1900s where they banned alcohol, but actually not selling it and not making it for real, and have people actually convinced about what the bad things can do about it. We need more than commercials. We need shows. More documentaries.
Wow. Well, I know our listeners are going to appreciate all of your insight and all the things that you're sharing, especially at such a young age, being so aware of what's going on around us. So I want to thank you for joining us on this episode of the podcast. I really appreciated this episode. It was great to talk to you. I can't wait to have this conversation over and over again.
Well, I'm really glad to be here, but note, parents should teach their kids what's actually going on in the world.
I agree. Parents, you heard it here. Make sure your children understand and know the issues around them, because their schools may not be providing that information to the children, and it is our job as parents to make sure our kids understand and know these issues and that they're equipped to do something about it. JJ, thank you so much for joining us.
And one more tip to parents. Make it fun. Kids aren't going to do boring stuff. Don't just sit around and give them lectures. Give them competitions, rewards, and punishment for not doing it. Discipline them to endure the environment. And that goes for you too, just so you know.
Well, thank you so much. And that is our episode of the Environmental Justice Lab podcast, where we are for the people and the planet. Thank you so much.
I'm glad you guys can have me.
Have a great day, JJ.
You too.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.